Oh, yeah,
get them involved.
make them feel a part of the process, I understand.
Yeah.
What was the point you just made when you said during reality testing?
You kind of want to, when you're reality testing, you kind of want to remember what we've talked about so far with the whole, how a case goes through the system, and the fact that there's a chance that the state's attorney will look at the file and decide they don't want to go to court. Maybe that's why they're in mediation to begin with. And if there's no agreement reached, it may not go to court. But there's
So
also,
then what happens to it?
if it doesn't go to court, it can either be diverted to another program or it can be screened out, which means basically it goes into that big old filing cabinet and nothing happens. But that's not to say that cases don't go to court, too. Don't get me wrong. The state's attorney will petition cases if the victim really wants it, and if they think they can prove their case. Okay? Any questions on that, or shall we move to the meat of the matter? Why we're really here. And Cookie, I was telling them about our mediation, and Michael doesn't feel that we had the community represented, and I felt we did. What do you think?
Well, I feel that we had the community that wanted to be represented.
Okay.
Because we had CAPS people, we
Right.
had Friends of the Library people. I don't know how the rest of the community was, if they were or, notified of this. I think it was just people who were specifically involved.
But as community organizations, don't you feel that part of the community was?
Oh, part.
I mean, it would be impossible to get the whole community. I'm sorry.
What was your
Well, I don't think the Friends of the Library are the community, they're the party. I mean, they obviously have a cut on this.
Well, how about CAPS?
CAPS would be, what does CAPS stand for?
Chicago Alternative to Policing, so it's just a
Well,
community.
they've got a cut on it, I mean, that's,
Well, I think they like to see themselves as part of the community, but yeah, they were, in a sense, they were parties. They weren't bringing the charges. I mean, it wasn't like, I think the Friends of the Library were supporting the head of the library who was there.
there are those, for
But
example.
it's not like the CAPS would have brought charges against the kids. I mean, it's kind
But
of
they're
weird.
certainly,
Right, they would.
but they're certainly closer to something that is police or prosecutorial than, let's say, other kids in the community.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they were definitely there with the idea that they wanted the juveniles to do something. So if you mean in that sense,
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't the party who was bringing the action, but yes, they were the other side, definitely. They weren't like
So I
sort of
regard-
independent people.
Yeah, it's just that I regard them as closer to the other side than I do as community representatives. I guess
That was
that's-
more their term. I mean, that was sort of how I think that's how they were trying to present themselves. But I mean, basically, they were on the other side.
Representatives?
That we're representing this community, this is our library we're involved in, this is our community, but definitely from the side, definitely from the side of the library.
Okay, why don't we start talking about what we all have done to actually try to get juveniles to talk in mediation. This is actually an eval.
Oh, an eval.
Yeah, no, not an
Okay,
outline.
never mind.
So why don't we start by just, anybody throwing out any ideas of what have you tried that works in these mediations? What hasn't worked for you maybe? Or what have you had trouble with? Do you want me to, I could
What
start?
if we started with that one, because we have some
Okay.
feelings about that. We had a point.
What didn't work?
Well, one of the parts was that we had 10 kids? 8 kids. We had a whole bunch of parents and guardians or aunts, uncles, whatever. We had then the library and its community support, so to speak. But at one point, because we went through and had all the kids respond and say what they needed to say, and after it had gone on for quite a period of time, one of the parents in particular, but they were all sort of going along with him, said, now we want to talk without the kids. So basically they wanted to talk within the parents group before they talked with the other side, and then they wanted to speak parents group and the library group, but without the kids.
Right. But basically what happened was, it was basically a mediation between the parents and the community. Because I don't think the parents actually met alone. So basically, the
They
kids.
met alone for a short time, when they were talking about what they wanted, what they were gonna agree to or not agree to.
Okay.
And then we brought them, because we had them, I think, in 3 separate
Okay.
groups.
Okay.
And then, I don't remember, I could be wrong, but then it was just for a short time, and then everybody was back together except for the kids for a while. And then the kids were sort of told what they were gonna.
Right, and that,
do,
I think
and that was
that's
sort of
part of
weird.
the problem we decided in that case was that these children who this case was about really weren't involved in the discussion as to what was gonna happen with them.
They were involved in the discussion of what actually
Right.
happened, what the incident was, and they were part of the table for a good long period of time, but when it came down to what the parents were willing to do or not do, they really were sort of like, okay, we're the parents, get the kid, we're gonna decide what they're gonna do.
Mhm.
And that
So
was
one
sort of-
parent made that decision, you kind of went along with that? Is that what happened? Or-
He was
The
very.
the parents and the library and the community people talked and decided, okay, this is what we're gonna do. And they set out the hours that were gonna be performed and where it was gonna be performed.
How old were the
But-
kids?
Well, the library didn't decide they didn't want the kids there. It was the
Right.
parents that said, we want
Right.
the kids out of the room.
And was there any reality testing on that? I mean, what did you guys say?
Well, I don't know if it really did.
No.
I think it just sort of,
We said, okay.
I think one of the problems is always like when they're in the evening and there's that many people. The kids were all like 10 to 12. Was most of them 12 or was it 12
10
to 14?
14.
10 to 14.
And they
most
were
of them
pretty much
about
between the
12.
12 to 14 range.
Yeah. I think there were only like 2 who were little, but,
Teenagers or high school?
Yeah, I don't know about
well, I
that.
think they were in high school. No, I think
Eighth
they were
graders?
probably junior high school or elementary school up to 8th grade.
Well, I guess I can say some of the things I think and some of the problems I have. Sure. What I try and do when I've done these juvenile cases is to almost force the parents to take a secondary role. At some point, they do become decision makers in a way, but I try and make the discussion and the options and everything else come from the kids as much as possible.
Mhm.
And my experience is that then at some point, the parents almost have to take over to some degree, because the
Okay.
parents may be paying money, they may be semi-responsible for making sure the kid does the community service, and I want to reality test all of that with them as well. So I try to keep them all in the room as much as possible, and really go with the kids, and I seat them that way. I put the kids up next to me, and I put the
Okay.
parents as far away as I can
And
possibly
we
get
had
them.
we actually had the huge table here. We had the parents at the other.
Yeah.
At the other. I'm just smiling because the kids were so funny when we'd asked them. They went through their opening statement, and they said what happened. Then we said, well, what would you like to see have happen? Community service. I'd like to do community service. We get to the next one. What would you like to do? I'd like to do community service. Every down the line, like they'd practiced ahead of time because they'd heard of what this thing was, and they were going to do the community service. So in that sense, they did have their idea.
Right,
And it was
it was
actually
their
very
idea.
funny. Yes, this is what I decided I'd like to do. But they didn't know what that really meant.
Then I think there tends to be a presumption when these mediations happen that the kids are guilty. And I don't make that presumption, and I make it real clear at the table that there's no such presumption, because especially the person, let's say it's a graffiti case, who's had the graffiti, they maybe have seen the kid do it, they're almost positive who it is. But unless the kid says, yeah, I did it, I don't assume that the kid did it, and I don't treat it that way. I also think that, let me tell you the big problem I have, and some of the ways I go about trying to solve it, but it's totally inadequate. The big problem I have is just a big cultural problem. I mean, I'd much rather deal with white on black, or any other cultural, male, female, any other cultural issue that we face, rather than with children, because I think there's just an enormous cultural gap between me and them. What I try and do is to give the kid as much respect as possible. And I also try, and rather than think in terms of community service, although I know that has happened a lot in mediations I've done, I try and think rather in terms of who's the expert in the room. And very frequently, the kid is the expert. So on graffiti, when I get in caucus, I talk to the kid as though the kid is the expert. So now I gather you're an expert in this, is that correct? You know how to do this, you're really great at it, you know other people who do it, and the answer is always yes. And then, okay, what do you, given that you're this big expert, what do you have to contribute to the person who had had his garage or this place of business graffiti? I'm just to use that as an example.
Okay.
And sometimes it really does work well. I mean, because we can start to talk, when they get back together again, instead of talking about community service, we can talk about, okay, how can this kid help you avoid graffiti in the future? Because frequently the kid knows how to do that. So,
Okay.
It was interesting in ours, though, because when we tried to go a little bit in that direction, the head of the library was felt so burned that he didn't want, because did we talk something about patrolling, or they would be there
Yeah.
and they would keep other kids from being there, but it was like, he didn't want to deal with them, and when they talked even about community service within the library, he said, you know what, that's like punishing my staff all over again. So it was interesting that, well, okay, so much
Yeah,
depends on the
whereas,
other side
and
and how
I,
they felt.
right, and so that's a counterexample, because I've certainly gotten situations where the kid has ended up working in the business,
Okay.
because you can see there's certain skills the kid has, and
And how-
drawing and stuff like that. So, you know, I mean, there's
Okay.
some
So
mutual.
if he hits an art building, that's great.
Yeah, right.
But,
So, I mean,
okay.
I just look for our usual standard stuff. I mean, I guess all I'm really saying is, number one, I try and treat the kid as though it's the same situation as in all mediations. What do they have to contribute to each other? But I do think, and that's why I'm here, because I think I really have to try hard to bridge that cultural gap, and I don't want to fake it.
Okay,
I-
Michael.
I have that same problem.
Mhm.
Middle-aged white guy with young people. I don't relate very well.
Well, you know what, I'm a little bit younger than you, but I had the same problem in mediations, and I just flat out would say, you know what, I'm sorry, I don't understand when they use a term, you know, and it was a street slang kind of term, and it's just like, I think they said a bowler or something, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah, but I don't think it has to do anything particularly with whether or not you're white or black when you mediate these. I understand.
No,
that
it's
there's a-
middle
it's
age.
age.
More of the problem.
Also,
It's
yeah, but
age.
not just age, also too, it depends on the environment, okay? The community that you're in.
Mhm.
Because there might even be some black kids who are their same age might not understand the terms.
And
Okay.
so,
Okay, but I'd like to get back to
Well,
what Michael was stating earlier. You mentioned the issue of innocent or guilty. That should, to me, has already been determined, for me anyway, that has already been determined when the kid comes into mediation. I'm not saying that should be a part of the mediation, I understand that.
okay, but it isn't. It has never been determined that that minor is guilty or innocent.
Well, the point simply is, why is he there?
Because that
There's an
kid was
inference that
arrested for something.
there's an inference that he
It's
is.
like any
No,
arrest, though.
wait a
It's like
minute.
any
Well-
arrest, you know, that you would
Huh?
do.
How many,
Well, why is he there?
Because-
Why was he singled out or she singled out to come to mediation?
Well,
because he was
it's the
what?
same as any other case where you could have somebody that was arrested for something they didn't do. And
Like-
they're in mediation because that's what the state's attorney sent them to, and
I
not the
understand.
court.
I understand
And
that.
it could be that.
I understand that, but still.
They could have been in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I understand
The
that.
last one.
I understand that, and there are wrong prosecutions. I understand all that.
Mhm.
But I'm saying that the individual has to feel something because he or she is being made to go through the process. Does it make sense or not?
Made
To
some,
feel,
what
you
do
mean to-
feel something?
I mean that he or she is not necessarily being punished, but they have to be here at the mediation,
Right.
and therefore, what's the purpose of the mediation?
To
Is
try
it-
to
They can
resolve
say that
this
they're
case.
innocent, so they can present their position on
Right.
whether they did this.
Some
or didn't.
deny that they, you know, it wasn't me, it was my friend.
Right.
You know, who's your friend? Well, I'm not gonna tell my friend, but it was my friend.
In other
Or
words-
some will give the name, it was
in
Johnny.
other-
and
in
he
other
was
words,
my
the
friend.
medi-
I've
comes-
done CTA cases where the kid came in and said, I wasn't here, and the guy said, you know, I was over here and I didn't do this, and the guy said, okay, and it's all dropped.
Yeah. The
But
point
that
of
should have been
this,
done at the state's attorney's office.
but how
They
this,
haven't been to court
They
yet.
haven't
when
been
they
to
come
court
to
yet.
the court.
This may be the
Okay.
first time they're actually getting to sit down with the alleged victim
Oh.
of their crime to actually say something, and then the victim, you know, then the victim has a chance to say what they wanna say. And if they hear the other side, they might, you know, just
Remember
say,
how
well,
this
that's
is
fine, okay, I
instead of
wanted to know
court.
why you did this, or if you didn't do it, then what's your friend's name that did it, you know.
Also, it's a determination factor there.
determination factor.
Not like a
where-
Whether or
legal
not he or she is
determination,
gonna
but,
accept responsibility or not.
But they
or
may
not.
not have been responsible.
Exactly.
Right,
So
right.
he or she is not gonna accept responsibility.
Right.
Well,
Okay?
okay,
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
that's
that's
not
an
true.
option.
That's not true in all the cases either. I've had a lot of cases where I've had the kids sit there till they were blue in the face saying, I did not do this, I do not want to enter into this agreement, and the parent sat there and said, I don't care if you didn't do it, I am not going back to court, it is going to cost me more to have to take another day off of work, you will sign this agreement, and we will pay this money so we don't have to go back, and the kid's like, but I didn't do it, I don't want to do this.
What have you done in that situation? Because I'm curious, do you let it go?
That's coercion.
I usually have I'll have a parent and the child talk about it, and I reality test them through it, what's better for you, and to be honest with you, in the long run,
Yeah,
the parent is the one who is the guardian over the child.
The decision.
True.
Sort of
And
like
they
the-
are the ultimate decision maker. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna not sit there and say, reality test and try to go through all that stuff, but
Not
But
a good
in a
reason.
case like that, wouldn't you have to make an agreement that, in which this is in no way an admission of guilt? I mean,
Well,
it
we don't-
doesn't have to be.
but there
Responsible.
should never be any kind of
I
blame in
understand
an
that.
agreement to
I
begin with.
understand that, but that makes this
That could be
maybe I
that-
don't know what you're talking about.
That could be a term in an agreement. You could say something like, by entering into this agreement, Johnny Smith is not admitting guilt. If that's something that would be really important to the minor, maybe that's something you can ask them. Is there anything we can put into an agreement that would make you feel better about it? Sure. What's the matter, Carlos?
Nothing.
What?
Well, I just think that there's some cranks here that need to be straightened out, before the mediation process gets involved.
Why?
I don't know, it's just something that,
Give us an example. What are you thinking of that would be uncomfortable for you to
Well,
see?
I mean, I have problems with the fact that the kid has not admitted or recognized that he or she is actually responsible for whatever incident occurred.
But they may not have been.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that perfectly.
So why shouldn't they have the opportunity to try to work it out in mediation? If they didn't do it?
Go ahead.
Let me give an example. 'cause
What are you
this
gonna
might be- I did a mediation with a boy who absolutely said he didn't do it, and it was pretty clear that he probably had, but he absolutely would not say that he had done it. And as the thing went on, it became clear that he was very aware of the fact that his mother was going to insist that he didn't do it, and he was getting cues from her, and it wasn't a space in which he could admit. And I think kids are very aware of, even when and I always do what Michael talked about, try to talk to the kid primarily, but there's a point at which they know who's in charge. This was a little boy. He was a 9-year-old boy, and his mother didn't want to pay this, and she said there were other kids there, and how do we know it was him? And that was it. And so what I did was, I talked with him, with everybody there, about did he understand the thing about I forget, the adjustment, the station adjustment
Okay.
thing, all of that, and how it could be very good for him if he did it, but of course he shouldn't say he did if he didn't, and then there was this silence, and then I said, this is a very big decision for a little boy to have to make. And there was a lot of quiet. This was near the end of the thing, and I'll spare you this. And there was a lot of silence, at which point his mother became the mom, and she said, well, whether he did it or not, we were involved, and I'm going to pay this. I mean, it was really interesting, and the other people responded too, because I think all of a sudden people were remembering that was a little boy,
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I don't know why it seemed to me like that might have had to do with some of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
you were raising.
Okay. Well, actually, in listening to all of you guys talk, I've actually heard a lot of good suggestions that have come up with how you can get children to talk. And maybe we could put them on the table and talk further about these ways. I've heard a few ideas come from Michael in how you seek the minors. You were talking about having the juveniles sit closest to you and having the parents sit further away. Also, not making a presumption of the juveniles guilt, to just kind of go in there with an open mind and to give respect to the juvenile. And I'm actually going to ask you to talk more about that, how you do that. And to treat the child like he's a juvenile, or like he's an expert in whatever area you're talking about. So that's with Meaty then, in that way. And getting them as the expert to talk about ways to try to prevent that problem. Also, from Nina, I heard you say silence, that you let some silence go out there. And I think that's also another very good technique to use with children, to try to get them to talk, by allowing them the space to and time to talk. Just because sometimes kids might take a little bit longer to formulate their thought patterns, and so if we just take a few minutes to let them do that, not rush them along so much, I think that would be helpful. But to get them to talk.
But also, I was talking about addressing the impediment to their talking when that impediment is apparent.
Okay.
And that's what I was doing. I was saying it to him, but for her to hear.
Okay.
And,
I think we should have mentioned too the comfortability level,
sorry?
making the kids feel comfortable.
Okay, and so let's look at some ideas of how to do that.
I would first of all greet him or her the same as I would grown up,
Okay.
you know, with tender love and care, and you know, make him or her feel that he or she is being recognized as part of the process.
Okay.
I wanted to go back to the issue of the silence,
Okay.
because several times it's happened when, and I can't even remember now exactly what the issue, who the people were, but that the silence, they were able to be silent a lot longer than I could stand it. And I could stand it a long time, but if it's an adult, I can wait them out. But with the kids, they were waiting me out, and I just, at a certain point, I started talking again. And I don't, how long did you wait in that case there?
Well, you see, what you're talking about is a little different. I was waiting for the mother to hear that she was putting this child in a very difficult position. So in my mind, I wasn't waiting for him. I agree with you, though. With children, I'm coming at this from the direction of doing therapy with kids for years. And I do not believe that you wait kids out. I think that you have to figure out why they're not talking and help them be able to talk. And there are lots of ways to do that in a therapy situation that you might not do here, but some of them are the same. But I agree with you. I would not outweigh a child. I think that it's the job of an adult to try to help kids be able to talk, but not wait. So when I was being silent, it was for the mother to hear that she was putting this child in a difficult position, and she did. But it wasn't all that long. It was. I was when I said it at the time that I said it. There was a fair amount of feeling in what I was feeling, and she heard it.
The genuineness. It always needed to get
That's a good trick, genuine.
But I mean, it's
Yeah, once you,
totally sensitive.
there's actually,
I mean, that in the most genuine sense.
no, there's actually, Mr. Goldwyn from Metro Goldwyn Mayor, I think the thing is that the most important thing in business is to be genuine. Once you can fake that, you've got it made. But do you have other suggestions about what we might do with children that would be useful in these mediations?
Well, I'm not sure I know what, if kids aren't talking, I'm not sure I know why. I mean, I think the thing is to figure out why they're not talking, and it's of course different in every situation. And I can give you another example, but I don't know. Had another case where the mother came in livid, another boy at school that was beating up her son because he told on him. Anyway, she came in just out of control, rageful, with one solution, which we've all heard a zillion times in mediation. And the trick there was getting it away from her solution to let the kids come up with what was gonna solve it. And they sort of agreed with her solution. And then, that was not so much, about kids, because I did the same thing you would do with adults. Their idea was that they had to be, I forget how many, what is it, in a order of protection, how far
Feet,
apart?
how many feet apart, or yard, feet, I think.
So I kept saying, how big is 100 feet? How big is that? What is that? I don't even know
They'll
what a
never
football
know.
field is. I kept asking that question, and nobody knew the answer. But finally, one of the kids said, you know, I don't think that's going to work, because I play basketball and he plays baseball, and we're out there in the same place. I don't think that's going to work. And so then we had to figure out a different thing, and the mom was willing, you know, when we figured out other things. But the kids were involved in. I mean, that's a big part of it, is involving them. But
And how do you do that?
That's the real key.
how do you do that?
How are you doing that?
I mean, how do you do it with
When-
adults?
when we did it
You
with-
talk to them, right?
Okay, so you ask them questions? I mean, I think that a lot of problems is that a lot of times children don't want to talk in mediations.
Oh.
That or if they talk, maybe it's like yes, no kinds of words, answers. And so I think the point of what we're trying to do here tonight is try to brainstorm on different ways. And you
And
seem to be
also-
an expert.
And
so.
also, I think another problem is that I think more than most adult parties, that kids regard the mediator as the person in power and are much more likely to say things that they think the mediator wants to hear than, so, I mean, I find myself spending some
Do
time.
kids do that?
That's my impression. I don't know if it's true, but
Well,
so.
it didn't ours. They knew exactly what they
Well,
were. You know.
I can see where Michael is coming from. As a you say you're a therapist? Okay. I mean, we have not touched on the fact, in other words, I don't believe that there's a model that can fit all these kids. You know, and I don't think it was even is intimating that at all. But what we have to take into consideration, I believe, is the exposure, the maturity level of the kids that are coming in. That's what I've observed, okay? Because, you know, you might have a 9 or 10, 12-year-old kid. That kid might be 20 years old as far as experience is concerned. You know, you got to take that all into consideration, you know, and try to fill it, I believe, as to what level you're going to be talking with this kid on.
And how do you find out that
Well,
information?
you know, I mean, first of all, I would personally, as a mediator, want to know the kid's background. You know, whatever the CCR might have, or perhaps ask a few questions and have them introduce themselves just to get an idea or feel or whatever. You know, I want to know something about the kid.
So what kind of questions would you ask them then?
Well, what grade is he in? What schools he go to? Stuff like that. Does he have any extracurricular activities? And, you know, because I have one case that consisted of all gang members. You know, and those people, young people, very much exposed. You know, so you cannot assume that. I mean, when it comes to vocabulary, maybe there's a difference, but when it comes to actually knowing how to be savvy, they're very streetwise.
You can tell that in our group where we had the 8, because there were the kids who were sort of the talkative kids.
Yeah.
And there were 2 or 3 that were brothers who were, I thought, very savvy, because they weren't going to say anything. I mean, when you asked them a question, it was a very quick answer. They knew, it was almost like, I know I don't have to talk, and I'm not going to, you know, put it in. And you could tell, I mean, they were tiny little people who sort of
Mhm,
knew what
exactly.
they should do or not do.
Exactly.
And then others who were, I mean, really all across the board. But I think, in ours, we were pretty direct, because it was like we said we're going, in a part of the process, that we were going to go around and everybody was going to be asked the questions, or everybody was going to talk, and pretty much just said, okay, Joey,
Yeah.
you know,
Talk.
talk. What's your turn?
Yeah.
I think some of what I've done, I mean, and it's, you know, you become different whoever you're with in the room, so it's not like you have a set thing, but, I know in one case, I remember saying something, I mean, I usually like make a big point of the thing that we say in the opening statement about this decision being voluntary. I mean, I really make a point of that, and I say to the kids, you must not agree to anything here that doesn't work for you, that you don't like. This is your decision, you will be signing this, you have to make sure, you know, I mean, I spell it out a little more, because kids aren't used to that in life. They're not used to being in that position, so I make sure that they really
Yeah, basically empower the kid.
Right.
Yeah.
This is their agreement, and they have to understand that. Then,